What is up, guys? It is CycloneFanatic Daily. I'm here with Chris Williams, and currently we're in our remote studios. But as you're listening to this, we'll probably be sitting on an airplane headed down to Dallas for Big 12 Media Days. How pumped are you, C-Dub?
Relatively pumped. I'm always like this kind of time of year where I'm ready for the season to start, but it also feels like we just got done with spring football, and like it does feel really early when the Big 12 does it now, the week right after the fourth. It just because there's so much that could happen between now and fall camp going and the actual season, but nonetheless, when you get into this business like we do, this is what you do it for, to talk about the games and the players. I'm over the off-season storylines and ready to talk about some actual football. So let's get after it. What about you?
Well, I'm pumped too because the Northwest Bank studio can go anywhere. It can
Yes.
be while I'm in Ankeny, you're in Bondurant. It can be when we're in studio in Ankeny, or it can be all the way down to Dallas. Whether
Give
it's
me
big.
internet on the moon and we can do a podcast.
Yep. And we'll do it all from the Northwest Bank studio all
Yes.
football season. I can't wait. I'm with you. I'm excited to just actually talk about football. No more realignment, NIL. Once the ball's kicked off, all that stuff goes away.
Yeah, and like there's a point of this too where it's really hard to do the off season now when you follow it as closely as we do. It is really difficult to keep rosters in line, transfers, recruits, coaching changes, because there's just so much. So it does feel like when we get down there to Dallas, and last year it was in Las Vegas, okay, now I can like really dive in and get ready for the season. And that's where I'm at. And I've kind of been like that the last couple of weeks. Feel like I'm starting to know the league pretty well. But as you know, Jake, this is the one league in college football that I feel like nobody knows anything.
No clue.
As far as like the difference between the third team and the 14th team is just not that much. And we saw that last year with how the preseason poll was and how the season actually played out.
That leads me into what a storyline that I'm focused on this week from an Iowa State perspective. When you talk about so many close games and the separation between the third place team and the 14th place team, how did Iowa State jump from a potential 7-5 season last year to a historic 11-win season? It's Rocco Becht. A lot of that could have been by his own shortcomings with the pick sixes, but at the end of the day, Iowa State, they won 11 games because Rocco led the Cyclones on 4 game-winning drives. And I'm really interested to talk to Rocco, not about the game-winning drives itself, but how can he put the team in this new look offense in the position where they don't necessarily need 4 game-winning drives this season. That's one of the main storylines, I think, heading into the season for Iowa State.
Yeah, and the work he's been doing with these wide receivers, right? Neither of those guys are going to be down there, but Rocco's a pretty forthcoming young man, I feel like. And listen, I interviewed him at the beginning of the offseason. I did a podcast with him. He's very aware of the turnovers and the bad turnovers that he had last year. Now, some of those I think he got pretty unlucky on, but you still can't make up the pick sixes and all that. And his completion percentage needs to significantly be better, especially with all the tight end usage Iowa State is going to have this year. And he the great thing about Rocco is he's wearing all of that. And I interviewed his dad last year, and his dad is, a professional football coach and constantly harping. So this is a young man who I think I believe, Jake, that first year nobody really knew what coming off the gambling thing. It was kind of like throwing you out into the 10-foot. Let's see how it goes. I think last year he progressed as a leader, and he wore that team. He owned it. I think this year we're going to see the next progression of Rocco, and that's from just a really specific, signal caller, see the field, that type of thing. I'm really excited to see what he brings to the table.
I've been working on some of our position previews, and the stat that I came across when I was doing quarterbacks, these will be out the week after media days, is Rocco's touchdown to interception percentage was 4th in the conference last year, which is really respectable. Like 9 interceptions on the surface isn't bad. It's just 4 of them were pick sixes.
They were just bad ones, yeah.
I think a lot of that comes with, like, he is so good over the middle of the field, and the pick sixes come when you make a bad throw on the sidelines. And when you make a bad throw on the sidelines, you've got, 1, 2 receivers and yourself to make the tackle. And that's where I think if his completion percentage goes up to 64, 65 naturally, he's going to be a little bit better on the sidelines.
That could be 2 wins.
Oh, yeah.
For Iowa State. And the other thing, too, on the pick sixes, and I don't think we say this enough, it's not always on the quarterback.
No.
On those big misses. Like,
Jalen Knoll had a drop last year. The second UCF one was a drop.
And there was another one, I don't remember exactly which one, where I know the guy ran the wrong route. So, like, that stuff is too. But, yeah, I truly think if he can be 65% completion percentage, that's a huge jump. But if he could do that, like, that might be the difference in 7-5 and 10-2.
Yeah, it very well was last year.
Yep.
So I know you want to talk.
Well, for me, like the Iowa State thing is the defensive front seven. Like you got Caleb Bacon, like for one, like all the faith in the world that he comes back, but is he the same Caleb Bacon? Maybe he's a better Caleb Bacon. I don't know. What do they expect from this guy? Is the plan still the same? He was going to have his hand on the ground a lot last year. If that's the case, I like Iowa State's defense a lot more, right? Because they need that edge guy to put pressure on a quarterback. I'm super confident with Dominic Orange. What about these other transfers, right? Malone. Yeah. Then you had the Yale kid. Sorry, there's so many transfers now in my brain. You have to keep them all straight. But, like, you know, and they're going to be disingenuous if they come out and be like, oh, yeah, we're really – because you don't know until you get into camp and go through all this stuff. But this is when we can kind of start to decipher. I think that guy might be Campbell's pretty forthright at these things. This is what's great about – this is why I pay the money for us to go down to Dallas. Campbell will shoot you straight when you come down there and talk. I mean, he told me that year he thought that Joel Lanning could be an all Big 12 linebacker, and I'll be damned, he was.
Right.
So I'm really curious, like what, and it's not. I don't think there's not a Will McDonald on that D line, but Jake, I think linebacker could be the best position on the team in terms of depth. We'll see.
You got 2 of them right there. Ryland Barnes.
So many of these guys played last year that shouldn't have been on the field, and now you're getting them all back. And you get Willich back, McLaughlin for a full year, Bacon, right? Like, it's really, really incredible that they won 10 games with the amount of injuries that they had as a whole, specifically at that one spot. So to me, the whole defensive front seven is a question, but I'm confident in the linebackers. But, you know, up front, it's like, I just want to know the depth situation because they will come out. I promise you. They're going to say, we're going to play 2 deep across the board. This is going to be and I believe them, but they got to have somebody step up to be able to put a little pressure on a quarterback. Who's that guy going to be? I don't know. I don't think we'll get the answer in Dallas. And then the other thing, it's like, I'd like to know, I've heard rumblings, but I'd like to know what Campbell thinks about that corner slot opposite of Jontez Williams.
Yep.
And I think that'll be a 2-3 guy battle until they arrive in Ireland. I really think that's how that's going to go, and I think they're going to go out there that first game and give a couple guys a shot. But unfortunately, when you look at the schedule this year, well, you just don't have a lot of time to figure that out with Kansas State in week 0.
Yeah, so when you talk about the linebackers, Rob Gray and I were actually just talking about this. We said if sophomore year Jeremiah Cooper shows up this year, like, watch out. And I think maybe some struggles from Cooper last year where he wasn't the same guy, or even Beau Freeler and Malik Verdon, these safeties were like seconds before the play pushing these walk-on linebackers into position. Like Ryland Barnes was playing 8-man football a year before he was playing at Arrowhead Stadium. And you had these safeties that were out of position, not because they're dumb players, because we both think the world of Beau Freeler and Malik Verdon and Jeremiah Cooper, but these guys didn't really stand a chance when they were trying to make up for
and then
brand new linebackers.
Like so that Kansas game when Verdon goes out, then you're like,
yeah.
Then
you're throwing a new safety in the mix too.
Yeah, yeah. So it's easy to see how that all compounded.
Yeah, and I think to your point, if the linebackers are a strength, that's going to make the back end of the defense that much better. And when those two units are good, then hopefully you don't need somebody to be Will McDonald to get pressure on the quarterback, but they just have to get some pressure. They can't be dead last in the Big 12 again in sacks. It's just not sustainable.
No. But before we get into the Big 12 stuff, I do want to thank our friends at Fareway for sponsoring and sending us down there. They're awesome supporters of everything we do here at CycloneFanatic, and it's a big deal to them to see us covering the Cyclones like this. So Fareway, thank you. We very much appreciate the support ongoing with our buddies over at Fareway. So what did you want to do? Big 12 topics too, right?
Yep. So I think a pretty obvious one that I think a lot of national people will be focused on is the preseason poll, or the lack thereof. I mean, this man, Kenny Dillingham, if you're watching on YouTube, Spotify, Twitter, Facebook, this guy was picked to finish last year and won the league. Not that can't happen again. We have the Vegas odds, but I'm just interested to see what a guy like Dillingham thinks about the no preseason poll. If he cares at all, it wouldn't shock me at all if all these coaches said, "Yeah, it's just noise." But I have a hard time believing that the number 16 wasn't placed throughout that football facility in Arizona last year.
Good point. Yeah. I would guess that the majority of these coaches will say that they don't care, and and some of them will claim that they didn't even know, and that they'll be lying, right? But I don't know. Campbell, I could totally see him having no clue, actually, now that I say that and think about it. Yeah. Dillingham's a great quote, isn't he?
Oh, yeah. He had the quote last year of talking about the kicker. He's like, might as well pull somebody off the streets. They'll do better than our guy.
It reminded me so much of the old Leach story where he literally grabbed the walk-on, or the kid. Have you heard this story?
I've probably heard it from you over the years, but
this was a Texas Tech game, and man, I don't remember what year it was, but they were having kicking problems, and it was a kid that was out kicking a field goal to win like free books for a year from the bookstore or whatever. And this kid drilled like a 30-yarder. And Leach saw it when he was walking off to the locker room, and he sent like a GA out to grab the kid. And that kid ended up kicking PATs for him for the next like 3 years. But
that's amazing.
The Dillingham reminds me a little bit of Leach, like where he just goes up there. I'd like to hear Dillingham's thoughts, having represented the Big 12 in the playoff very well too, right? They gave Texas a run, yeah. What does he think about the offseason storylines with the Big Ten and the SEC? Because I'm guessing he'll give us some good stuff. But that's probably a little forgotten about here. So we're going to focus on a lot of these teams. But Brett Yormark will speak to us. But to your point, I just can't see many of these guys acknowledging the fact that they've killed the preseason poll, because they don't like to give any credence to any of that stuff. But we'll see.
And then what are you focused on Big 12 wise?
I'm really, from a league standpoint, Texas Tech is the most intriguing team to me, just because of all the offseason headlines of money spent in the portal. And it feels to me, Jake, they feel a little bit like Florida State last year.
Mm-hmm.
Florida State, a lot of because it's a non-Big Ten SEC, big spender, preseason hype. Now, can they handle it? Now, I'm not saying I think they're going to fall flat on their face like Florida State did. I'm not saying that at all. But I feel like this could go one of two ways. Like they could be. It wouldn't surprise me if Tech is 12-0 going into the Big 12 championship, and that would probably be best case for the league, because that would probably allow you to get 2 in the playoff. I mean, that's one of the only ways I could see it happening. And I think that they might be the one team talent-wise in the league because of that portal spending that could make a run in the playoff. Maybe Arizona State has something different to say about that. They returned 17 starters from last year's team. No Scattaboo, but still quarterback, coordinators, all that. But there's a lot of pressure on Coach McGuire down there just with all the headlines. And you know he's going to be asked about the, reported $50 million roster, and he's got a huge oil booster that's stirring everything up, right? Like it's a good spot to be in where you want the resources like Texas Tech has, but man, it just ratchets up the pressure on your job. You got to win. If Tech doesn't win the Big 12 this year with this roster, it's a bust.
So I picked them 5th in my preseason poll. One of those reasons being they go to Arizona State, they go to K-State, and a lot of what you said, the resources can play against you. If the noise gets to be too much, what do they respond like? When you have a bunch of transfers coming in, and I know that they return a lot of talent as well, but when your primary talent base is built around guys who weren't here a year ago, who haven't had to go through the trenches together. If you look at Iowa State, they haven't had to go through a gambling scandal together. They haven't had to go through a 4-8 season together. Like, what does it look like if they go and get knocked off by a 6-6 Cincinnati team? I don't know, and that's why I'm fascinated by Texas Tech this year as well.
It's a different sport than basketball, but one thing we've seen a lot in basketball is I think it precedes what's going to happen in football, because you can just be a little more progressive in the sport of basketball with 13 scholarships.
Yep.
And you'll often see these teams with a ton of transfers where when it's going well, it's going really well. And when it's going bad, it can, the bottom can fall out really fast. So the difference is in football. I've seen some of these Creighton teams that I follow very closely with Coach Mack where, because they have a ton of transfers over there. And they'll lose, 4 out of 6, and you think they're done, and then they run off and win 8 in a row, and they're the best team in the Big East, right? So, but the problem is in football, if you lose 2 games, it's over.
You're done.
Yeah, and I think that's what happened with Florida State last year. That was a talented football team. The problem is they lost that first game of the year, and the media starts just pounding on them, and that locker room quit on Mike Norvell. So that's the challenge that Coach McGuire had. I think he's a really good coach. I think he knows X's and O's. I have a lot of respect for him. We haven't seen him have a challenge like this down in Lubbock for like a culture standpoint, and everybody's looking at you. They haven't, they've been just moderately good. They haven't been really good since Mike Leach was there.
Yeah. They had Patrick Mahomes and never did anything real.
Yeah. It's always just kind of been like, man, if we can get to 9-3, and there might be a year that I'm forgetting, and I apologize if there is, but it's just you're all of a sudden like when a fan base like that has expectations to win big and then it doesn't, man, it can get really ugly. So
especially
to me,
when they've been talking trash to Texas and Texas
yeah,
A&M
like
the last
that
week.
is the most interesting team. Like last year it was Colorado and Dion. Like unequivocally for me, it's Texas Tech this year.
We'll have a lot to talk about this week. Much lesser extent, I'm fascinated by Baylor too, because right now Dave Aranda.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one, Jake.
It's cool, but how cool is it? Because we thought, at least I thought, I'll speak for myself, I didn't think he was getting off the terminal in Ames last year after those 3 straight losses, and then they were maybe the best team in the league the last
did a good
6
job
games of the season. So
yeah, he did a real good job at the end of the year.
They brought in a lot of weapons. Sawyer Robertson comes back. I'm blanking on the running back's name, but he was their best freshman running back in program history. I picked them 3rd in my poll, but if they go, if they go 8th or 9th, like, is Dave gone?
Bloom and I on our Wednesday show, they're the team we had the hardest time with because I could have agreed with you. We had them 8th, but I could see them 3rd. And and again, that's what's so hard about this league. Let's just say, you and I both agree, we think that Tech has the highest ceiling, right?
Easily.
Okay.
If there's one team that could take down Georgia, It's
Let's say that Tech maxes out, just for a little hypothetical. Okay?
Yep.
If that's the case, what is the difference between team number 2 and team number 8?
4.5 points.
Right?
Like
That's what makes the league so great.
What's team 8? Kansas?
I don't know. Like Bloom and I had a Baylor, but it could have been Kansas. It could have been. Some people may think it might be Iowa State. You know?
Did you see Jalen Daniels taking down Arizona State on any given day? Easily.
Oh, absolutely. Kansas was. I mean, you say Baylor was playing the best football. I would argue Kansas may have been at that point when they started to get healthy. And I think Leipold's the finest offensive coach probably in the league, in my opinion. Ask John Haycock about Lance Leipold, right?
Oh my gosh, nightmares the last 2 years.
Right. So I think Kansas is fascinating. They're spending money, and they've got like a 8th-year quarterback now who some people had as a Heisman contender 3 years ago. Well, he's had some problems and some injuries and stuff, but that's still the same dude. I've seen him. Like, would it shock me if they go win 10 games? No. It's a fun league.
I'm pumped.
And then you still have to have like this baseline though, and this is why I went Arizona State, Iowa State. And it's boring, but quarterback, coach, coordinators, most starters, like that has to mean something. Now, to your point, how does Iowa State not be in all these field goal games in the last 2 minutes? Because that ball, like they lost all those games for a really long time. Well, they won them last year. I just don't want to put myself in that position if I don't have to.
There were 2 Xavier Hutchinson drops, a Jalen Knoll drop, and a Jace Gilbert field goal in 2022 from going 8-4. Instead, they were 4-8, and
arguably maybe their best defense in a really long time.
They're first in the conference by a wide margin.
Yeah,
and that's where all of this comes back to is if you can increase the margin from a little bit to even a touchdown and not have to rely on the 2-minute drill, it'll just make life a lot easier for everybody.
Let's get to Dallas, buddy.
Let's do it.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in. We're going to have so much coverage at CycloneFanatic.com.
It's going to make you sick.
Right here on this YouTube feed, Spotify feed, Apple Podcasts, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you're listening, wherever you're watching. We're going to have so much content. It's going to be awesome. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks to Fareway for making it all possible. I might go reheat some 4th of July brats for
Let's
dinner.
do it, baby. I've been eating skinless brats for like 3 straight days.
And they never get old.
No.
All right. Tune into CycloneFanatic.com. We'll have all your Big 12 Media Day coverage.